Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here as part of our Humans Being More online class. I'm hoping that you are finding lots of productive things to do with extra time that some of you may be having if you're self-quarantining at home. I don't know if you're watching the tiger thing on Netflix. I've been told I have to watch some documentary about a tiger on Netflix. Other than that, I've been working from home remotely, and ECAN has allowed us, I guess we're required by state law to do it, but those of us who can work from home are all working from home. So everybody in ECAN is answering your calls from the comfort of their living room. And we decided there's never been a better time to have a Humans Being More experience than online by Zoom. And we're going to be spending some time over the next few weeks. We'll hold these classes every week, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6, 7, 8 p.m. Eastern, we will have a class. And these Humans Being More classes are going to be about 30 minutes long. We will have homework assignments at the end of the class for you to work on during the week. And some of our classes will be just on a topic that takes one single class, and some of our topics will take longer. Tonight, we're going to start with an author and a book that I think is life-changing. I think it could be life-changing for many of you. The author is Martin Seligman, who is a psychologist. He's a professor. He teaches at the University of Pennsylvania, previously taught at Cornell. He was the president in 1998 of the American Psychology Association. He's a very talented teacher and researcher and author. He's written a lot of books, and one of them is called Learned Optimism. And we're going to go over the first part of the book in a few sessions. We won't go over the entire book, but we're going to go in over the first third of the book, where he outlines some ideas that I think are really amazing and really beneficial. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and I hope you can join us in future follow-up classes as we go through the first part of this book. These Zooms will be recorded, so you or team members or family members can watch them afterwards. And just like our Humans Being More courses, these are open to anybody who wants to participate. So consultants, customers, family members, friends are all welcome to participate and join us in these online classes. So the book we're looking at, and you don't need to purchase the book or even read it to benefit from this class, but the book is called Learned Optimism. And it has to deal with two approaches to life that people often take. Often people take a more optimistic approach to life. Sometimes they may take a more pessimistic approach to life. A story that might illustrate these different approaches. A husband and wife had two twin boys. And one was a dyed-in-the-wool pessimist, and the other was a dyed-in-the-wool optimist. Didn't matter with the pessimist, he was always pessimistic. With the optimist, didn't matter what happened, he was always optimistic, always, always, always. And the parents thought, is there something we can do to maybe balance out our twin boys just a little bit? And they took them to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, oh, I've got the perfect exercise for them. I'll set up 2 rooms. In one room, I'll fill it with every beautiful toy imaginable, every beautiful game, every beautiful sports equipment, everything that a young boy could want, all his desires, and I'll fill the room full of those, and we'll present that to your pessimistic child. And it will help him see that there are good things in life and just look on the bright side. And with the optimistic child, I'll take a room and I'll fill it full to the top with manure, horse manure. We'll just fill it from the bottom all the way to the top. The parents said, okay, this is unusual, but you're the expert. Let's see what happens. So they brought in the pessimistic child and they showed him his room, and he went in and he looked and he saw all the beautiful games and toys and sports equipment, and he just started crying. He just broke out in tears. And the parent said, what's wrong? And he said, all my friends are going to be jealous of me now because I have so much stuff and all these instruction manuals I'm going to have to read. And I don't know how to play all these sports that we have. And everything's going to need batteries. And I'm going to have to, and he just was heartbroken. He was a pessimist. He was just crushed. And the little boy who was the optimist, they took him in and they showed him his room, and immediately he jumps in the manure, starts digging. He's just digging furiously. And the parents say, why are you digging? Why are you digging? And he says, there's a pony in here somewhere. I just know it. So optimists, pessimists, there are different approaches, different styles in looking at things. And we're going to look at how the style that you may have, how it may be affecting your life. And I'm not making a judgment about an optimistic or a pessimistic approach to life. Sometimes pessimists get offended if someone brings up the idea that they might be a pessimist, and they'll get offended and say, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. I'm realistic about everything. I have a bad attitude and I think things are going to turn out bad because I'm being realistic. So I have the right approach to life. So, but I'm not making judgments about a particular style or particular personality. But we are going to look at the idea that whether you have a more optimistic approach to life or whether you have a more pessimistic approach to life, it may have a lot to do with the consistent patterns of thought that you have about events that happen in your life. So when a certain event happens, something takes place, optimists usually have certain ways of looking at that event. Pessimists have different ways of looking at a similar event. Let's say a bad event, something happens. A bad event happens to an optimist and they might immediately think about it or look at it as temporary. It's something that's going to pass. It's something that's going to go away. It's not permanent. It's not going to last forever. It only affects their life in that area. It's a setback only in that specific area of their life. And it's not their fault. They don't look at the bad event necessarily as their fault. And optimists often approach events that happen in their life always from this kind of a perspective. It's temporary. It's something that will pass. It's just going to affect one area of my life. It's not going to affect everything. And it's not something that I caused. It's not something that's internalized. Pessimists, on the other hand, often look at bad events as something that's going to last. It's permanent. It's something that's continue. It's something that's going to affect every area of their life. It's going to touch not just that area, but it's going to reach out and spread through other areas as well. And they often think of it as their fault. It's either something they caused, or it's something they brought on themselves, or karma or the universe is making it happen. And ultimately, that bad event is connected to them. Optimists and pessimists can look at the world in different ways, and the challenges of interpreting the same bad event is that an optimist may actually try harder, and a pessimist may just give up. And we're going to look at how these different patterns, how these different styles of thinking can affect somebody's life and how they can influence what happens to them. Optimists, it's been shown, tend to do better in school. They tend to do better in college. They tend to do better in their careers, in sports, which makes sense. Optimists tend to do much better in those endeavors. They usually have better health. They age better. They tend to live longer. There are a lot of benefits that come from being an optimist. One of the biggest is in the area of just achievement and success, where pessimists tend to have more negative repercussions from being a pessimist. They tend not to do as well in school. They tend to have more challenges in work or in their careers. They tend to have health outcomes that are not quite as strong. So there are a lot of downsides that come to come from pessimism. Often pessimists have greater experience with depression or with other kinds of illness. And perhaps the biggest challenge is states of helplessness, of descending into states of helplessness. This idea that nothing you choose, no decision you make can have an effect on you or the world that you live in, what happens to you. And that's a horrible, that's a terrible place to be in. So we're going to look at this idea of optimism, of pessimism, of these different styles of approaching the world. And we're going to look at the benefits, we're going to look at the repercussions of them, and we're going to look specifically at what it is that we can do to learn, if we're choosing to do so. And if you're just a pessimist and you're realistic, this class is not for you. It's not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you're a pessimist and you're super proud of it, because I'm a realist, I look at the world from a real perspective. If that's just the kind, this class is not for you. There's a different class we have to do first, and then come back and do this class. But if you're open to the idea that there may be patterns of thinking, there may be ways of looking at the world, there may be styles of approaching events that happen to you, whether they're good or bad, that certain patterns of thought might be helpful in allowing you to be someone who is more optimistic, who has a more optimistic outlook and optimistic perspective. Before we dive into that, I just want to ask if anybody's willing to share, do you see yourself, do you perceive yourself as a more optimistic individual or someone who's more pessimistic? Is there somebody who wants to share? You can unmute yourself. Just unmute yourself.
This is Kimball, and I definitely see myself as an optimist. I'm that kid digging in the poo.
Yeah.
So you're gonna find what you look for, and I just tend to look for the good stuff because it makes me feel better. And I know that the research shows that people who are optimistic have the best outcomes on everything they do in life. So let it roll.
You are an optimist, and I like being around you because you're just someone who's enjoyable and fun to be around because you are optimistic. I would agree with that perception you have of yourself. Anybody else want to share? Do you see yourself more? Being a pessimist is not bad. Hey, Yoko.
I just wanted to say, I think most people in Nikken are optimists. I can't really think offhand of a pessimist. Everybody seems to be pretty, positive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's generally the case. And I think that's why these lessons are going to be so powerful, is because when you start to see when you have pessimistic thinking patterns, and you do, everybody does, and when you start to recognize those, it's going to allow you to boost, to accelerate your optimism even higher. So I'm really excited for you to learn these patterns. There's going to be a homework assignment. I'll give it to you again at the end. But your homework assignment today is going to be to ask 3 people, and these are 3 people who know you well. These are people that you have very strong connections, relationships with. So people who know you, they like you, you have a good relationship. It can be a family member, a friend. If you're not able to ask them the question physically because you're practicing social distancing, you can do it by phone or Skype. But ask 3 people, do you see me? Do you perceive me as an optimist or a pessimist? What do you think I am? Do you think I'm an optimist or a pessimist? We'll see what happens. We'll see the kind of responses, the kind of answers you get. You may be surprised. Don't get upset with people. If somebody says, yeah, you're a pessimist, don't get angry and start arguing with them why you're not. But just, it's a fact-finding mission. You're looking for information. You just want to see how people perceive you. And you don't need to respond. You don't need to make judgments. Just ask them what their ideas, what their thoughts are, and just listen to those and kind of keep those. If you want to make notes, you can do that, but just kind of keep those in your back pocket, and we'll review those at the beginning of the next class. But that's the assignment, to ask 3 people, are you a pessimist or an optimist? What it is that we're going to be working on over the next several weeks, because we'll spend 4 or 5 weeks on this book, Learned Optimism, is you're going to become a master of new cognitive styles, of new cognitive skills. Now, cognition has to do with thinking and our ability to think. It has to do with perception. It has to do with memory. It has to do with judgment. It has to do with reasoning. And cognition, the process of thinking, is incredibly important. And when we learn cognitive skills that are empowering, when we learn cognitive skills that help us to perceive or see the world more clearly, the results are always bound to be better. Perhaps the biggest damage, or the thing that leads people to experience depression or stuckness or helplessness most often, are irrational ways of seeing the world. Seeing the world in delusional or irrational ways can be extremely damaging. There's a room filled with toys and it's a horrible tragedy. That's irrational. It's just irrational. But there are thoughts that can lead us quickly to feelings of anxiety or upset or depression, if they are irrational thoughts, if we're perceiving the world incorrectly. So we're going to learn some new cognitive skills working together, new ways of thinking, new patterns of thought. And you're going to get really good at this. If you spend some time with this, you're going to be able to say, oh, I'm thinking in a pessimistic pattern right now. And actually, if I think about it, it's irrational. It's not really true. So I'm going to choose not to think that way. I'm not going to choose this. I'm going to choose a more optimistic pattern, or a different way of looking at this event that's happened, this thing that's just happened in my life. There's a shift that took place in psychology starting in the 60s. What happened is that in the area of psychology, people started looking less at the environment as being the biggest dictator of choices that people might make and behavior that people might have. And they started to place more emphasis on individuals and their ability to think, to choose, to understand, to know. There was a kind of a shift more towards really looking at the individual and the choices that the individual, the thoughts of the individual, as having kind of the biggest predictor of what somebody might do. And this is the era where Dr. Seligman came out of and started making most of his discoveries, started doing most of his research. And one thing that he discovered in his research is that achievement, or finding success, that there are 3 things that are required. It's important to have talent, or at least to have some skill or some ability when you're working towards achieving or accomplishing something. It's necessary to have some desire. There's got to be some motivation, some desire to do it. But a third criteria that can really help in achievement or achieving success is a sense of optimism. When you add optimism to talent, ability, desire, the outcomes, or the possibility of good outcomes, are much, much higher. So we'll spend some time to really get good at practicing these approaches to optimistic thinking versus pessimistic thinking. And I think you'll find it really interesting as we delve further into the book. There's a concept that Dr. Seligman broaches in the first part of the book, which is the biggest danger of pessimism, is that it leads towards learned helplessness. learned helplessness is the idea that it's the giving up reaction. It's where something happens, and if you're helpless, you can't make choices to affect your own life or influence your own life, and so you give up. It's the quitting response. It's making a choice to not try and affect the outcome, but just to give up. And we'll look at how it is that learned helplessness develops, what kind of thinking processes or patterns of thought that cause learned helplessness to be created. And we'll look at a second idea, which is explanatory style, how we explain things to ourselves. And this is the actual cognitive process where we reason through and we think about good events that are happening to us, bad events that are happening to us, and how we explain those events. So explanatory style, the manner in which you habitually explain to yourself why events happen. And some people have an explanatory style that's more optimistic in terms of explaining why good things or bad things are happening. And some people have an explanatory style that's more pessimistic or more realistic. The good thing about an optimistic explanatory style is it stops helplessness. It takes us out of a place where we can't make choices that affect outcomes. So we're going to learn how to act in ways or think in ways that help generate these more positive or optimistic explanatory styles. A pessimistic explanatory style spreads helplessness. It doesn't stop helplessness. It ends up spreading it and creating more. So these are our two ideas we'll look at as we look at patterns of thinking and how we're approaching things. We'll look at the idea of helplessness and how we can learn to be helpless. We'll also look at the idea of an explanatory style. And this is actually my favorite part of what we're going to be learning. Because when we outline it, when we set up the different ways we explain things to ourselves, I think you'll see really strongly in yourself how sometimes you explain the world to yourself in very optimistic ways, and how sometimes you may explain the world to yourself in very pessimistic ways. Right now, we're in a situation that's just horrible for people with pessimistic explanation styles. Someone who explains things pessimistically is going to say, we're doomed. Our government is horrible. People aren't social distancing. Nobody is taking this seriously. Other countries have created this. I mean, there are just all kinds of patterns of thought that can start generating that really aren't helpful. We're never going to get back to normal. My savings have been ruined. There are all kinds of thoughts that can put us into a place where we become helpless, where we don't think we have any choices or can make any choices. But there are styles of explaining. There are styles of explaining. People are doing the best that they can do. Styles of thinking about things that can be much more positive or much more optimistic. I have all this time now. You know what I thought? I'm going to do something about this tomorrow, but we've all got a month right now. Basically, you've probably got a month. I mean, the month of April 1st to April 30th, 30 days where you're probably not going to be doing a whole lot. Some of you may be working from home. If you're an ECAN consultant, you're probably doing a lot of work from home. But if you have another job as well, you may be working from home, you may not. But we have 30 days where we can accomplish an amazing amount. And I thought to myself, I should really use this month to become a better Jeff. That's what I should do. I'm thinking optimistically. It's an optimistic pattern or style of thinking. So I don't think we have to even look at, this is certainly a challenging, difficult time. I mean, we have people who are dying for goodness sakes, but we also can use this time as a way to make our life better and help other people to make their lives better. So, you know, there's an idea that's brought up by Martin Seligman here in the first part of the book, that in your heart, and identify which one it is. Usually people carry in their heart one of two words. In your heart, you may have the word yes being carried, or you may be carrying the word no. And just think about, what is the word that you carry in your heart most of the time? Is it yes or is it no? And when I thought of this morning, I thought, it's yes, but boy, there are some times when it's no, no, no. So certainly it can shift and change, but what is the word you carry in your heart most of the time? And if it's yes, most likely you're someone who has a more optimistic style, a more optimistic explanatory style, but we're going to work together to learn the processes, to learn the ideas that help us to engender patterns of thought that are more optimistic. The challenge with pessimism, with pessimistic thinking, is it doesn't lead to good places and it doesn't lead to good things generally. It can lead to depression, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to upset, it can lead to getting stuck, to just getting stuck and not having the ability to move forward. But optimistic, more optimistic styles, more optimistic patterns of thinking can really help us to move towards what we want to achieve, what we want to create. And we're going to work together to make that happen. So anybody want to share? When I asked the question, do you hold the word yes or no in your heart? Was anybody able to answer that for themselves? Anybody want to share? And just unmute yourself and share with the group.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. Can you hear us?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you.
Did you want to share?
So I did actually. So I tend to be, I've actually been told a couple times I'm annoyingly optimistic sometimes. So I would have to say that I am a yes kind of in my heart thinking person. It's funny, actually, like right before I got on the call, I was a couple minutes late because I was getting some, messages from a friend of mine, and, he's not doing so well with his mental health. And I literally just told him, like, kind of what we were talking about, and, take this time to do something better for you, learn something. And then I like started showing him books that I have. I was like, yeah, man, we can even like pick a book. We'll read a book to each other, like a couple pages, whatever, just to like get him out of his head system. And so yeah, he's like, yeah, you're right. Like you're right. I should be taking this time to do something for myself, because what else would I be doing if I was at work? I wouldn't have this time right now. So yeah, it's a hard time for people in my generation right now, especially like workaholic type of people. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I think it's really wise to understand that some people may not be able to easily shift their explanatory style or the ways of approaching the world. And sometimes we need to be really gentle with how we choose to help other people. How we choose to help other people to have different perspectives. It's definitely possible. I remember after I went to Humans Being More for my first time, there was a period in my life where I was just really on fire in terms of how I was seeing the world. I was living with my brother, and I was just in such a good mood, super positive all the time, just feeling really good. And during that time, he was pretty much clinically depressed. He was really having a rough time in his life. And I was just super, super positive. And he asked me to move out. One day he sat me down and he said, yeah, I need you to move out. It was that tough for him that he couldn't stand being around. And I did. I moved out of my brother's house and got my own apartment. And I felt awesome. I didn't necessarily feel bad about it. I got that I was just, my joy and my love and my excitement, it was just too much for him. So I think we need to be careful in working with others or trying to affect others, because sometimes the pessimism can be so deep that our optimism can end up doing more damage. But I think if we're gentle, or we make suggestions that are doable, and Elizabeth, it sounds like you approached this case and your friend in a really productive, positive way, empowering way. So that's cool. But these ideas can be kind of like dynamite, because they really do require that we look deeply at ourselves, how we see the world and how we see ourselves. But I think you're going to enjoy it. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So Martin Seligman's Learned Optimism. Next week, we're going to be talking about the idea of learned helplessness and how this happens, how people can put themselves into helpless states where literally no choice they make, nothing that they're going to do is going to affect the world or affect any kind of positive change or outcome. And as a result, they just become helpless. If I told you to stand up right now, it'll give you $1,000, boom, you do it in a second. There'd be no helplessness at all. You would just act, you would make it happen. But if I told you, I want you to change the dilation of your eye, I want you to make your pupil open up, you can't do that. You're literally helpless when it comes to adjusting the dilation of your pupil. You can't force that. You're helpless. You don't have any choice over that circumstance. So there are things in life where we actually are helpless, but in the majority of cases, choices we make and decisions we make can affect and change the outcome. But if we're in a state where we choose or allow ourselves to feel or to be helpless, it can really be difficult to make change. So that's what we'll talk about next time. Your homework assignment is going to be to ask 3 people. Ask them, do you perceive me? Do you see me as someone who's more optimistic or more pessimistic? And ask it in that order: optimistic first, pessimistic second. And then just listen. And if you want to have a conversation, do afterwards, but no judgment and don't argue. Just ask. It's a research. It's a fact finding. And I'll have a few people report their findings next time. And we'll get back together next Tuesday, 5 p.m. Please, if you're not on my Team 2020 mailing list, please send me your email and ask to be added. So if you just showed up tonight and I don't have your information, the way I'm going to be contacting and letting people know about this is through our Team 2020 email list. So if you're not signed up for this, if I don't have your email and know you want to be part of it, please send your email to Jeffi, Jeffi @nikken.com, and I'll add you to the list and make sure that you get the invitations to these Humans Being More online courses. So thanks everybody for being with us tonight. We'll keep it at 30 minutes as best as possible each week. I love all of you and hope that you have an amazing week. Do lots of amazing things for yourself. Stay healthy, and we'll see everybody next week as we continue our Humans Being More online. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being with us.